For the past few months, this game has been sitting pretty at the top of Steam's most anticipated projects. And this is despite the fact that the last game by these same Chinese developers, the strategy game Art of War, Red Tides, has been stuck in early access for 8 years. But why all the hype? Who is this mythical monkey? And why is he so good at beating everyone with his staff? Could something truly valuable and original have slipped through the Chinese censorship, rather than yet another mobile game or gacha grindfest? I've been scouring the internet for info on the most anticipated game of this summer, maybe even this year, Black Myth, Wukong. I've watched all the gameplay videos and read developer interviews. I've got to say, this game is genuinely impressive. However, many people seem to misunderstand it. Some still think it's going to be a typical Souls-like in a Chinese setting, which isn't quite accurate. Today, I'm going to bust some myths and explain what this action game is really about. First off, many see Wukong as having elements of the Souls genre, mainly because the gameplay videos show bosses whose attacks you need to dodge with rolls, and there are shrines where you can heal. That's true, but these factors alone aren't enough to classify it as a Souls-like game. For instance, Wukong will have a narrative element that traditional Souls games avoid like the plague: actual dialogue. Not the kind about dragons and primordial darkness seeping from a golden abyss, but normal dialogue written by humans for humans. So, we're looking at an action RPG based on Chinese mythology, with its story rooted in the classic Chinese novel, Journey to the West. This is a pretty hefty work that tells the tale of the monk Xuanzang, who travels the Silk Road to India to retrieve Buddhist sutras. If you didn't know, sutras are collections of wisdom and thoughtful insights, not aphorisms. Back in the day, without the internet or crossword puzzle magazines, you had to travel hundreds or even thousands of kilometers for wise quotes from someone like Jason Statham. The first thing you need to know about the game is that the monkey-like central character is not the monk, but his battle buddy, the Monkey King, named Sun Wukong. His name is in the game's title, so whether you call him Wukong or Wukong, it's up to you. It's the same name. Though I'm sure some sinologist will berate me in the comments. In the literary version, the monk saves Wukong from long imprisonment, and the Monkey King decides to repay him with his service and protection, at least until they reach India. In the game version, there are some intriguing rumors. For example, there's a theory that we won't play as the Monkey King himself, but as his legendary six-sided shadow, kind of like how in Devil May Cry 5, V was separated from Virgil. Similarly, Wukong might have decided to split off his shadowy dark side, and this inner conflict could be central to the hero's journey. This is hinted at in a couple of cutscenes and the name Black Myth in the game's title. This raises the additional question of how closely the game will follow the original story. I think it won't be too accurate, and we're in for a few surprises. Journey to the West isn't some dull, pseudo-historical text. Its vibe is reminiscent of Yoda's teachings on Dagobah. It's full of wise thoughts and ideas, but often presented humorously. The trailers also show a couple of visually silly but charismatic NPCs, and one of them is on your screen right now. Don't forget to drop your mythic like and subscribe if you haven't already. Our group of travelers heading to India will encounter various creatures, including shapeshifters. These aren't your typical European werewolves, but rather mythical beings capable of taking on different forms. In the literary original, the Monkey King fights them with a magical staff, and can also shapeshift. Both these features are reflected in the gameplay. Wukong indeed fights with a staff and transforms. In literature, transformation implies not just shapeshifting, but also the ability to perform various magical tricks. Wukong supposedly could freely enter and exit the underworld, leap on clouds, and walk through walls, all considered transformations. The protagonist of Journey to the West embodies the East Asian concept of a trickster, a cunning character who solves problems with wit, deception, and guile. A crafty, shrewd trickster with shape-shifting abilities reminds me a lot of Loki from God of War. The Monkey King's primary weapon is a legendary magical staff with a humorous name, Ruyi Jingu Bang, which can change its size at the owner's will. However, due to his transformation abilities, the hero can temporarily wield other weapons. For instance, in one gameplay video, we see a werewolf with a flaming glaive. What really blew people away is the graphics. By 2024, we've seen a few visually impressive projects, especially the second Hellblade. But at the game's announcement, such visuals seemed unreal, especially from China, which hadn't been known for high-quality AAA titles. The Chinese fantasy setting in a top-tier project is not just rare but almost unheard of, and here it's brought to life beautifully with Unreal Engine 5. It's hard not to be tempted by this combination. A unique, well-executed fantasy. Let's also talk about the game world of Wukong. Some had the illusion that it would be an open-world game or a Metroidvania, but no. Wukong is a mostly linear action game divided into missions, similar to the first Nioh. There might be some secret locations or light exploration elements because the developers were inspired by the latest God of War games. So, we're promised secret bosses, side quests, and loot, but there won't be an open world. Thank the heavens for that. The combat system raises the most questions. At first glance, it looks flashy and unique. The Monkey King pulls a magical staff from his ear, performs acrobatic moves, and looks impressive. But on closer inspection, there are various small nuances and details that slightly bother me. Let's break those down. First, the game won't have difficulty settings, but the gameplay promises to be friendly to a broad audience. No one's aiming to make players rage here, unlike the Elden Ring DLC. The developers cite God of War as a primary inspiration rather than Dark Souls. For instance, you can pause the game, and upon death the hero only loses a portion of accumulated experience. Judging by the presentations, the combat seems well animated. The protagonist moves sharply, giving the impression that Wukong wins through agility and acrobatics. One particularly cool feature is that you can dodge attacks by climbing the staff and launching powerful counterattacks from that position. I've never seen this in games before, though it might exist somewhere. Naturally, some attacks can be parried, clearly inspired by Sekiro. The literary version mentions that the Monkey King can perform 72 transformations. While I doubt we'll see all 72, we know the hero can temporarily transform into almost any defeated boss, which isn't easy to imagine, but exciting nonetheless. For instance, after defeating a werewolf with a flaming glaive, Wukong can take on its form and weapon. Besides transformations, Wukong can use various magical tricks to simplify fights. He can trap enemies in stasis, summon clones, and cast other spells. Despite a wide arsenal of tricks, you can only bring 4 active abilities into a fight, which feels a bit limiting. Still, I understand the balance reasons behind this decision. I've watched nearly all the available gameplay footage. While much of it impressed me, some parts were disappointing. Let's start with the good stuff. The developers worked hard to create diverse enemies. There are anthropomorphic creatures, strange demidemons like a giant baby, and even the meme bear, Go. Secondly, I loved the music. It's atmospheric and fitting, and the dynamic soundtrack syncs attacks with the music, creating an excellent experience. The gameplay looks sharp, responsive, and methodical, according to developers and journalists who tested the demo. There are no long delays or stretched animations. Interestingly, there's no dedicated block button, so you can't fight defensively. There's only a parry button to deflect attacks and a staff twirl to deflect projectiles. This makes the game reminiscent of Bloodborne, where you need to be aggressive to win. You can't spam dodge either. After 3 quick dodges, Wukong gets exhausted and vulnerable. Stamina exists, but doesn't seem crucial for dodging. Instead, the limit on consecutive dodges will be a significant mechanic. The focus system is also vital, similar to Virgil in Devil May Cry. Perfect dodges and successful staff attacks fill the focus bar, allowing powerful moves. Ordinary attacks deal minor damage, mainly to build focus for special attacks. Wukong has 3 combat stances: the standard crushing stance with heavy attacks, the pillar stance for aerial combos, and the thrusting stance focused on lunges. You can switch stances on the fly, keeping combat fluid and exciting. Despite the Chinese censorship requiring no blood or brutal damage, the developers compensated with solid sound effects and partial destructibility. However, the emphasis on spectacle sometimes sacrifices readability and mechanical depth. The flashy combat looks cool on video, but raises concerns about how it will feel with a controller or keyboard. Some attacks lack wind-up animations, others are hidden behind flashy effects or fur, and enemy AI can be weird, with foes flexing and spinning aimlessly. The transformation magic seems overpowered, giving Wukong a second health bar when transforming into a mini-boss or boss. Battles sometimes feel stretched, with lots of running around and awkward pauses. The combat system might lack the interconnected mechanics of a true Souls-like, with different gameplay elements feeling somewhat separate. Overall, Wukong looks incredibly promising, standing out from the typical Chinese mobile games and gacha grindfests. It's a valuable artistic project in an original setting, potentially introducing many to Chinese culture. Though not a Souls-like, it borrows some mechanics like healing flasks. It resembles God of War more, with an equipment screen and skill trees typical of action RPGs. I'd lower my gameplay expectations a bit, since it might be less enjoyable than the trailers suggest. The game should release at the end of summer on August 20th on all platforms except Xbox, due to memory issues with the Series S. If successful, the developers plan to turn it into a series of projects based on Chinese mythology, which I'm all for. If you like this game preview for Black Myth Wukong, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.